The courthouse smelled like old paper and quiet regrets, the kind that clung to the walls no matter how many coats of paint tried to hide them. Sunlight slid through the tall windows in pale strips, touching the wooden benches where lives had been folded and unfolded for decades. She walked in slowly, one hand resting unconsciously on the curve of her stomach, the other holding a thin folder that carried the weight of years. Her steps were steady, but her heart was not. It beat with the memory of love that once felt endless and promises that had once sounded like home. People glanced at her, some with curiosity, some with that faint judgment strangers carry when they sense a story they don't know. She had learned not to flinch at that look. 7 months of quiet strength had taught her how to hold her head high even when the world whispered. Her dress was simple, soft fabric flowing gently around her, chosen for comfort rather than impression. Yet there was a dignity in her presence that could not be stitched or bought. She paused near the entrance, breathing in slowly. This place was not new to her, but today felt heavier. Today was meant to be the end of something she once believed would last forever. Papers waited, signatures waited, a final line drawn beneath a chapter she had once written with hope. Across the room, voices murmured. A clerk shuffled files. A lawyer whispered to a client. And then there was him, standing near the far bench, posture stiff, eyes scanning the room with practiced impatience. He looked unchanged in all the ways that mattered, and all the ways that didn't. The same tailored confidence, the same controlled distance, the same habit of keeping emotion carefully folded behind his eyes. He had not seen her yet. She took another step forward, and something shifted in the air, like a breath held too long. When he finally looked up, his gaze passed over her face at first, familiar yet distant, until it dropped, just slightly, and everything in him stopped. Time did not freeze, but it slowed enough for the moment to stretch. His eyes widened, not in anger or accusation, but in disbelief so pure it stole the color from his face. The curve beneath her dress was unmistakable now. Life, undeniable and present, resting quietly where silence had once lived. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The room kept going, papers shuffling, shoes tapping, a cough somewhere behind them. But in that small space between their eyes, the world narrowed to a single truth neither had spoken aloud. She did not come to explain. She did not come to accuse. She came to finish what had been started, even if finishing meant breaking something open one last time. When she finally met his gaze fully, there was no bitterness there, only tired strength, the kind that comes from surviving nights where sleep refused to come, from mornings when hope had to be rebuilt from scraps. Her eyes carried the quiet grace of someone who had learned to choose peace even when it cost her comfort. He took a step forward, then stopped, as if an invisible line held him back. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. For the first time since she had known him, words failed him. She gave a small nod, not in greeting, not in forgiveness, but in acknowledgement. A silent understanding passed between them. Yes, this was real. Yes, this was happening. And yes, life had continued, even when he had not been watching. The clerk called her name, mispronouncing it slightly, as people always did. She moved toward the desk, every step deliberate. The chair creaked as she sat, and she placed the folder in front of her, smoothing its edge with careful fingers. She could feel his gaze burning into her back, heavy with questions he had never asked when there was still time. Memories brushed against her like ghosts, late nights once filled with laughter, plans drawn on napkins, promises whispered in the dark, and then a slow erosion. Missed dinners, unreturned calls, silence that stretched until it became normal. She had waited then, believing patience was love. She had learned later that love should never require disappearing. The clerk slid the documents across the desk. Please review and sign where indicated. Her eyes scanned the lines, each word clinical and final. Dissolution, assets, no contest. The language of endings always sounded so clean compared to the mess it left behind. She picked up the pen, her fingers steady. Across the room, he shifted again, finally finding his voice, though it came out low and uncertain. Is it mine? The question hung between them, fragile and exposed. A dozen answers rushed to her lips, but she chose only one. Honest, calm, unshaken. Yes. The word did not accuse, it simply existed. He swallowed hard, his hand gripping the back of the bench as if the ground beneath him had tilted. For a moment he looked like someone waking from a long sleep, suddenly aware of all the time that had slipped through his fingers. You didn't tell me, he said, not angrily, but with something close to grief. She looked at him then, really looked, and in her gaze was not blame but clarity. You never asked, she replied softly, and I stopped waiting for you to notice. Silence returned, heavier now, layered with regret and realization. The clerk cleared their throat politely, reminding them of the task at hand. She signed her name with a calm, practiced motion. The pen moved smoothly, as if her hand had been preparing for this moment long before today. When she slid the paper back, she felt a strange lightness, not joy, not relief, but release. He hesitated before taking the pen, his fingers trembling slightly as they closed around it. He stared at the page, then at her, as if hoping she might stop him. She did not. She only watched, her hand resting protectively over her stomach, a quiet promise to the life growing there. As he signed, something in his expression shifted. Not anger, not sadness alone, but the dawning awareness of all the moments he could never reclaim. The ink dried quickly, final and unforgiving. When it was done, the clerk gathered the papers and stood. You're free to go, she said gently. Free. The word echoed strangely. She rose first, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. For a brief second, she considered saying something kind, something that might soften the ache she saw blooming in his eyes. But kindness, she had learned, was not always about comfort. Sometimes it was about truth. She turned toward the door, each step carrying her forward into a future that no longer required permission. Halfway there, she paused, not because she had to, but because she chose to. Without turning around, she spoke softly, her voice steady but warm. I hope you learn to listen sooner next time. To the silences especially. They're usually trying to tell you something important. He did not answer, but she felt the weight of his attention like a held breath. She opened the door, sunlight spilling in, brighter than before. As she stepped into it, a quiet certainty settled in her chest. She was not walking away broken. She was walking forward, carrying a life that had already taught her the meaning of courage. Outside, the air felt different, lighter, honest. She paused on the steps, one hand resting on her belly, feeling a gentle movement beneath her palm, a small reminder that even in endings, beginnings find their way through. Behind her, inside the building, he remained still, the echo of her presence lingering longer than he expected. The truth had arrived without cruelty, without shouting, wrapped only in calm and dignity, and it left him facing himself in a way no argument ever had. She descended the steps slowly, each one grounding her further into the present. Cars passed. People laughed somewhere down the street, life unfolding with its usual indifference. And yet, for her, everything had shifted. She was no longer waiting to be chosen. She had already chosen herself. As she reached the sidewalk, a gentle breeze lifted a strand of her hair and she smiled. Not because everything was easy, but because she knew she was strong enough for whatever came next. The world stretched ahead, uncertain and wide, and for the first time in a long while, that uncertainty felt like possibility. She took a deep breath and began to walk, her steps steady, her heart open, carrying with her not resentment, not regret, but a quiet resolve shaped by love, loss, and the courage to keep moving forward, even when the path was unclear, even when the past still whispered behind her, even when the future asked more of her than she had ever planned to give, because somewhere within that forward motion was a story still unfolding, a life still becoming, and a strength still revealing itself with every gentle, determined step she took into the light, knowing that this chapter was not an ending at all, but the slow, meaningful beginning of something she had not yet fully imagined, something that would grow and breathe and love in ways that would one day remind her that every moment of pain had quietly carried her toward this unfolding miracle. This fragile hope, this promise she now carried not just in her arms, but in her heart, as the rhythm of her steps blended with the rhythm of her breath, and the rhythm of a future that was only just beginning to speak.